All right, welcome back. Now we're going to be getting into the material side of things. Let's go ahead and jump into the very first one. So we will be going over to the shading menu, but first I want to show you how to actually add the materials. We can actually do that from the layout. All I have to do is I can click on any one of these, come over to materials. You'll notice this one already has a material selected. So let me go to the base color, and I want to make this one red because generally the play button is usually red. I don't see anything updating, so I have to actually come over to one of these other modes. So this mode is rendered. This one is the look development mode. So look development mode is kind of nice because it gives you a really good preview of what has been shaded and what hasn't been shaded. So you can see this play button has not really been added anything to it because I created this. This default cube was already here when we started the scene, so it already had its own material loaded into it. So let's go ahead and put a material on this triangle button over to the material section, which is this little circle that kind of looks like a world. Don't get it confused with the actual world that's up here. That's something a little bit different. So let's go to this one here, and I'm just going to left click on new. By default, it brings in a principled BSDF shader, which is a very good shader. We're going to leave it at white, but I am going to turn up the metallic. I'm going to turn that all the way up, and I'm going to turn the roughness all the way down. That gives it kind of like this chrome look, which is kind of neat. I want to just right click this, make sure that it's shaded smooth, and make sure that both of them are shaded smooth. And that's why we spent all the time to make sure the topology was better. So even if I was to pull this out, hit GX to constrain it to that X axis, you'll notice that inside there, it still looks pretty good. It's one of those little details that you're really going to want to take time. Even though we're going to be putting a like weird looking texture on the actual red play button, it is nice that you just take a little bit of time to make it look like it's designed instead of doing the Boolean thing and just letting it go however you will. I'm going to go ahead and Command Z that just to put it back in perfectly. We're not done shading. Let's go ahead and jump into the shading workspace, and I want to get rid of these two windows over here. And to do that, I can right click in between this window and I can join areas. And then I can just push this off to the left and then left click, and that will take over that space. I'm going to do the same thing down here. Join area, push over to the left. And I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, hold shift, middle mouse button, kind of move it around. And I want to look at this red shader first. So I'm going to go ahead and select it, make sure that this is in fact the red shader. I can go ahead and rename this, call it red. And now there is one thing that I want to add to it. I want to add that there's like this magic texture that just, it's kind of like a weird noise generator. So to bring that in, I'm going to hit Shift A to add, and then I want to hit the S key for search. Now I can actually type in magic and it'll just bring it in. Hit enter and then left click to place it. I want to bring in one more thing. I want to bring in a bump node. So Shift A, S, bump, and then left click to place it. So these are nodes. If you're familiar with any of the other node-based compositing programs like Fusion or Nuke, then these might be a little bit familiar, but we're actually just working in shaders right now. We're going to take, using our left mouse button, I'm going to take the output of this color. I'm going to grab it. You can see it's like a little pick whip here, and I'm going to drop this into the height, and then I'm going to take this normal and I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to drop this into the roughness. Now you can see it updates pretty quick, and you can see what it looks like. And by default, that actually kind of looks pretty cool. I'm just going to leave it like that. I am going to give it a little bit more distortions just so it starts to add that little bit of swirl in it. And you can turn up the strength or you can turn up the distance. But to be honest, I'm just going to leave those the way that they are for right now. I also want to add a little bit of bump though. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this bump. I'm going to Shift D to duplicate it, and I'm going to bring it down here, and then I'm going to take this color and I'm going to drop this into the height, and then I'm going to take this normal and I'm going to drop it into the normal. Now it's going to be way too strong for what I want. I don't want it to be that strong, so that's why I'm going to take this strength and I'm just going to drop it almost all the way down. I just want a little bit of bump. And even then, that might be still a little bit much. So if you drop it all the way down, you see it just turns it off. I want to give it just a little bit of texture there. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that. That's how this button will be. And then for this one, you can actually see what is going on. We could add stuff to it, but to be honest, I'm just going to leave this as is because I just want it to be a nice flat surface. We are going to do something to it though. Let's go ahead and jump back into the layout mode, and I want to select this, hit tab, and you'll notice that we can still see these faces. And this is why we didn't make too much geometry in here, because I wanted these faces to be big enough to where I could come in here and I could add something special to them. So I'm going to come into face selection mode. I can also hit 3 on my keyboard to toggle between that. So 1, 2, and 3. 1 gives you vertice selection mode, 2 gives you edge selection mode, and 3 gives you face selection mode. That's going to be a lot faster than coming up here here to actually select it. You'll see me selecting these usually just because, you know, I'm doing a tutorial and I want to show you where those are, but just know that it's going to be a little bit faster if you use it that way. I'm going to start selecting these, and I just have to decide where exactly I want this to be. I think I'm going to go ahead and start it right here, and then I'm going to hold down the shift button, and I'm just going to work my way over this way. And I'm going to actually go back into the regular shaded mode because the chrome material is just going to mess a little bit with my eyes. So I'm going to go ahead and make a little area here. And let's see, I want this to be relatively similar. So I think that will work. And I'm just going to make it all the way around here. Right about there. That looks pretty good. Now with those selected, I'm going to hit E on my keyboard and I'm just going to push these inward just a little bit. Not too much, not too crazy, just enough. And that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to come over here to the material section and I want to scroll all the way up, and right here where it has this little plus symbol, I'm going to go ahead and hit that with my left mouse button. That adds a new material. And now right over here where it says new, I'm going to go ahead and left click on that. I can go ahead and rename this, and I want to call this one maybe glow. I want to change this from a principled BSDF. I'm going to go ahead and left click right there, and I'm going to come up to emission shader. All right, now let's go ahead and change the color to something cool. I think maybe like a light blue might be pretty cool, or even maybe an orange. Let's do orange, see what that looks like. All right, now let's come back over into the shaded mode. You'll see we don't see anything, and that's because we haven't actually assigned it yet. So right now it's still assigned with this material 001, which would be that glossy metallic look. But once I hit this assign button, you'll notice that now it is assigned just those faces with this new shader. Now we can't really tell what it's doing, so let's go ahead and go into the Eevee rendering mode, and then let me go into the rendering settings, and I'm just going to turn on bloom. And now I'm going to come back over to that material, and I'm going to turn this strength up. So I'm going to use my left mouse button, and I'm just going to turn it up, and you'll start to see it has a really cool looking glow. So that's going to look pretty cool when it's going around and whatnot. And if you don't like orange, you know, you can just change the color. Once you have that material set, I can come back into the color. Maybe I want it to be blue. Maybe that looks pretty cool. Maybe I'll just leave it as blue. So you have the option to always go back and change it later as long as you already have that material. I'm going to go ahead and rename this material, and I'm just going to call it mirror. And so now I have those two different materials. I actually have three different materials because I have this red base material that we used for the play button. All right, let's go ahead and tab out. Come back in here and we look and see what's going on here. It's kind of overpowering. Right now, you'll see that it just looks fairly gray, but if I come back into the look dev mode, it looks really cool. And the reason is because right now it's just reflecting this gray background. Now, of course, we could model a scene and have a scene all around us and it would reflect that scene, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to use an HDRI to really quickly get some better looking reflections. Now to do that, we can come over here to the world, and where it says color, I'm just going to go ahead and left click right there on that dot. And I want to use this environment texture. So I'm going to left click on the environment texture. You see it's pink. That just means that there's no HDRI or image that has been loaded in there. So we're going to have to use this open command, left click on open, and just go find an HDR wherever your HDRs are. If you don't have any HDRs and you would like an HDR, there's a really great place, HDR Haven. You can go ahead and click on that. They're absolutely free, and you can find all kinds of free HDRIs here. You just click over here to HDRIs, and maybe you want an outdoor HDRI. This one's brand new. Let's go ahead and click on that one. And you can pick what size. 2K seems to usually work pretty well. Let me go ahead and click 2K. It's going to go ahead and load it up. That's what the HDRI is going to look like. I'm going to come over here to my downloads. I'm just going to drop this right onto my desktop. Let's go ahead and reset that. Now I have this Wide Street 2K HDRI. I'm going to go ahead and open that. And there you go. Now I get some really cool looking reflections, and you'll notice we are in the Eevee rendering mode. And that's pretty cool. And even if I'm not going to use this as like an actual environment texture, it's nice to be able to just see it. As I spin it around, you'll actually get different types of reflections. So you can see actively what type of reflections that you're going to be seeing inside of your mirrored object. All right, so the last thing that I'm going to do, I'm just going to make a really quick scene. Now to do that, I'm just going to hit Shift A, and I'm going to bring in a new mesh, and I'm just going to bring in a plane. I'm going to size it up quite a bit, maybe something like that. Hit G on the keyboard and Z to constrain it to up and down, and I'm just going to push it down below my object, maybe something like there. It's pretty good. I'm going to go into Tab. Now I want to be in Edge Select mode, and I just want to select this back edge right here. And I want to hit E on my keyboard to extrude, and I want to constrain it to the Z axis. So I'm only going to just push it straight up And that looks pretty good. So we're going to make this little seamless backdrop. And to do that, I'm just going to grab this one edge here using the edge select mode. I'm going to hit Command or Control B on my keyboard, and I'm just going to start to bevel it out. Now, before I actually hit the selection, I can use my mouse wheel to add in more segments. We're going to go ahead and tab back out, and we're going to right click. We're going to shade smooth, and that's going to make it nice and smooth. So let's go ahead and give this its own texture. And for now, I'm just going to leave it as a base white. I might turn the brightness all the way up, but I'm just going to leave this like it is. You'll notice that the HDRI is kind of bright. It might be a little bit too bright. It's kind of washing out our colors. Now, it's real easy to fix that. Let's come back over to the world section, and down here where it says strength, I'm just going to left click and I'm going to turn the strength down a little bit. Now you can turn the strength down even more because I'm actually going to be adding in my own lights. So now I still get some pretty decent reflections, and I can tell that it's metal. And even though I won't be using this background, at least I have nice reflections and I get the benefit of having the light already. And now I won't have to be responsible for lighting the entire scene myself. So let's go ahead and add some lights while we're at it. So we'll notice that up until now, our cursor has been in the center of the world origin. Well, if I hit Shift and I use my right mouse button, I can actually replace that cursor somewhere else. And by default, it's going to automatically snap to whatever geometry it intersects with. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift A, and I'm going to bring in a light. And the first light I'm going to bring in is going to be a point light. Now I'm going to hit G and Z just to bring it up just a little bit, and GX to push it back a little bit. Now I don't want to push it back so far that it goes beyond my seamless backdrop here. So right about there is going to be pretty good. Now I'm just going to turn this up, but in order to turn it up, I have to actually go to the object data properties, and you'll notice it looks like a little light bulb. I'm going to left click on that, and right here where it says power, I'm just going to turn that up quite a bit because I want it to brighten up this backdrop a bit so it kind of looks like it has a gradient. We don't have a camera yet, so let's go ahead and we'll bring a camera in. Now, it doesn't matter where you bring that camera in. We're going to make that camera constrained to the actual view that we have here. So I'm going to hit Shift A, camera, and I'm going to bring that camera in. And then I'm going to hold down the Option or Alt and the Command or Control key, along with 0 on my numpad. That's going to make that camera take the position of wherever I'm looking. And now I'm going to use the Fly Camera command by holding down Shift tilde. And now I can actually move this camera around. I can also use the WASD keys to move it around, just like if I was playing a video game or something. I can kind of back it up, move it around, position it just how I want it, and then I left click to set it. If I start to orbit out, you'll notice that it leaves the camera mode, but if I want to go back to camera mode, all I have to do is hit the 0 on my numpad key. If you don't have a numpad key, you could always just toggle the camera view up here and it will do the exact same thing. I'm going to go ahead and orbit out just a little bit, and I'm going to Shift right click, maybe somewhere in this square, and I want to Shift A, and I want to bring in another light, but this time I'm going to bring in an area light. Area lights are a little bit different. They're a little bit more focused. So I'm going to go ahead and hit G on my keyboard, Z to constrain it. I want to pick it up off the ground. If you're not familiar with lighting, the lighting inside of Blender works very similar to the lighting in the real world. Now, we are using the Eevee renderer, so we're not going to have ray trace shadows or anything like that. But the larger your light source, generally, the softer those shadows will be. I'm going to go from shape. I'm going to go from square to a disc. And I'm going to go back into the camera mode because once I start to increase the power of this, I would like to see how it's actually affecting my model. So I'm going to just turn this power up a bit, and you can see that it's starting to have a nice fall off, and it's hitting this left side of my button. Now, the whole point of using these lights is to put shadows where we want it. Now, generally, I'm going to want to probably not have this play button just facing directly into the screen. I'm going to probably tilt it off to the left or the right. I will probably have to play around with where the lights are. You can kind of see right here where our light is because you can see the reflection of the light. So if I hide that, you can see it kind of disappears, and then I bring it back and you can see these nice specular highlights. You can also see the specular highlights up here on the left top corners. Let's go ahead and add another light. Let me go ahead and toggle out here. Maybe I'll add it somewhere here, and I'm going to go ahead and Shift A. Let's go ahead and bring another area light in. G to grab it, Z to constrain it. I want to lift it straight up. I'm going to go ahead and use my left mouse button, and I'm just grabbing this little directional finder thing, and I want to just point it right at my object. Make it a little bit bigger. Now this one's not going to be quite as bright, so I'm going to go ahead and hit 0, and I'm actually going to turn this light a different color so I can kind of tell what it's doing. Turn the power up until I can start to see it. Now you can see it's just starting to light this corner up blue a little bit. Now it's hard to tell, but it is already affecting my model. So if I turn it on and off, it's a little bit more apparent, but it's kind of missing and going off to the right here. So I may need to pull it a little bit further in front. So I'm going to go ahead and hit G, go ahead and grab the light, hit G, move it up forward just a little bit, go back into my camera using the 0 key. And now let me just turn it up a little bit. Now the farther away it is, the more power it's going to need. So if I want it to be closer, I won't have to use quite as much power. Nice thing is that, we don't have to pay for the power of these lights. So, feel free to crank it up as far as you need to. Let me go ahead, turn it on and off, and you can see what we're doing. You also notice that it is really lighting up the side here as well as not just the actual model. I think that's good enough just to get us by for right now. There's one more thing that I want to do, and that's in the render settings. Come over to the render settings. I want to come down to color management. So as of right now, we are in the filmic, but you do want to be in filmic. So the look is none, but I can turn it to a very high contrast. You're going to see that it's way more dynamic looking, and that's pretty cool. But you can even use curves. So you'll notice there's this little checkbox, and go ahead and click that use curves and then twirl that down right next to it. And then I can scroll down. And if you're familiar with using Photoshop or After Effects or any of these other programs that utilizes curves, you can actually make an S curve really easily. So I'm going to go ahead and select inside the point here, and I'm just going to start to bring this down and then maybe bring this up, and you can see what we're doing. Maybe that's a little bit much. Let me, not quite as much. That looks pretty crispy right there. That looks pretty good. So with that all set up, we could add a different color. Let's go ahead and give this an actual color. Let's come into the material properties, and maybe we'll give it like a yellow or a darker orange, maybe a blue, maybe something like teal, something like that. Back into the camera. All right, and it's just a matter of playing around with what colors do you like and what colors do you want your scene to be. Let's make sure that that is shaded smooth. It is shaded smooth. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and leave it like that for now. So now we're getting good reflections. We have good materials that have been applied. Now this was a procedural material, and then we went ahead and we added this glowy material using an emission shader. We also added this metallic reflective material. We added the HDRI on the outside. We turned down the power on the HDRs on the outside, and we added in a bunch of different lights to light our object and to light our backdrop and our scene. So, all right, in the next section, we're gonna go ahead and animate this play button and make a little video that we can maybe share with the web.